Hello! So today I'm going to show you how to tune a vocal within Melodyne. The version I happen to be using is Melodyne Assistant, but everything I do in this is also relevant to Melodyne Studio. The main differences with Melodyne Studio is polyphonic tuning and also the ability to tune multiple tracks at one time in one window. There's obviously lots of other features, but you don't necessarily need that to tune a singular vocal, which is what we're looking at today. So stick around, here it comes. Okay, so I'm using Logic, but you can use any DAW that supports Melodyne. Now, the first thing you need to do is load up Melodyne and transfer all the audio into the plugin. Now, depending on your DAW, there are going to be a couple of options to make that happen. If your DAW has ARA Support, then the transfer process is super fast. I'm going to show you. Go to your first insert spot and find Melodyne. Now, it's extremely important that it is the first insert. If you go to the second, then the ARA version of Melodyne will not appear. So because I'm in the first slot, you're going to have two here. You're going to have regular Melodyne or ARA. If you went into the second slot, you'd only see the regular version. So I'm going to go into ARA. Here we go. Now to transfer the audio, since we're in ARA, all you need to do is press play on your DAW for a couple of seconds and magic will happen. I'll show you. I see you, brother. Boom. That's it. Everything which is in this track has now appeared within the plugin window. That is how quickly it works. It's pretty amazing. If your DAW does not have this feature, then you have to use the regular version. So as you can see, I've gone into the second slot and only one version has appeared. So we're going to do that. What you need to do is you have to transfer the audio in real time. Now, one thing I really suggest before you start this is to set the folder in which you want the transfers to go to. If you don't do this, it can be stuck somewhere in your hard drive that you might not know, and then you might delete later. Whereas if you set that to something within the same folder as your project, then you always know where it will be. So go over here, project, and then set the folder by clicking this. Choose where you want that to be. In this case, I'm just going to save it with the same folder I have my Logic session. And there you go. Now it means every time you do a transfer, it's going to be loaded into that. Right, so now to actually transfer the audio. Start it at the beginning of all the audio that you want to transfer. Hit this transfer button. Now it's in record mode. And then you hit play and you leave that running until the end of the audio. So once the vocal was finished, that's when you hit stop. Save you from this. I see you, brother. So as you can see, I only left that going for a couple of seconds. So I only transferred a small amount of data. It's worth making a note here. If you're actually only wanting to tune tiny little bits of the song, it can be beneficial to just transfer in that tiny little bit that you want to do. But if you have both options, now you know how they both work. It's also worth noting at this point, if you've transferred everything in and all the notes are appearing in a line on one note, that's because the algorithm has been detected incorrectly. So what you need to do is go up to algorithm and then make sure that you have it set on melodic. Since I'm in ARA, it already knows what it's in, so it's already done this for me. If it's all on one note, chances are it's set to percussive, which if you're tuning vocals, that's not what you want. So make sure that's set to melodic. Since I do mostly vocal tuning with Melodyne, I actually then set my default to melodic. So anytime I transfer something in, it knows that it's meant to be melodic information. Once everything is transferred, you'll be greeted with something like this. So I'm just going to take you very quickly through what all of this information you're seeing on here means. All these blobs that you see here are essentially the audio. These are all the notes in order form that's been transferred over. And then if you go a bit closer and we have a look at this line that you see here, this is basically signifying the sounds within the audio. So this is like the vowel sounds and also showing you the vibrato and how it will go between notes and whatnot. This part at the end and sometimes at the beginning, so you can see something at the end of this note and at the start of this note here, these parts that are stripy, this is signifying the consonants. All the plosives and like the T's and the B's and whatnot. This is what those parts are. Now this part's going to be a little bit more relevant when we actually get to how to edit it with the various tools that Melodyne has to offer. But at this point, it's just good to show you exactly what all of this means. One thing that's really good to do at the beginning, especially if you're doing the whole song, is to set the key of the song. Now, since I've loaded in the audio via ARA, it's actually already found the key for me, which is fantastic. But firstly, if you just want to put in your own, because you know exactly what it is, you can do that. So if we go up to the top here where it says the key, it's going to double click and say we know it's C major, type in C major, and now it's told Melodyne that this song is in C major. Useful if things have actually been detected incorrectly. But if it hasn't detected it at all, then we can get Melodyne to do that. Now, the main thing when you're doing this is to make sure you're doing a good selection of notes. If you've only got like 3 to 5 notes or something, it's not really going to know exactly what key it is because there's not enough notes to determine it's a specific key over another. I've got a whole song in here, so so it should be enough. So what we're going to do is we're just going to select all of these. So just do Apple A or Control A, I think, if you're in Windows. Go to Edit, Chords and Keys, and then do Analyze Keys. So now it's analyzed all of those notes and it's determined that this is in G sharp minor. Now the next part is really useful. So on the side here, as you can see, it's highlighting a selection of notes and it's not every note in the keyboard, because the way I have it set it up is to show me which notes actually are in that key, which notes are in the scale of that. So I can change that. If I just click on here, you can allow it to show easily every note. But if you do know what key it is in, then it's really handy to just leave it highlighting what is important. What's also really useful at this point is to set up the snap value. So this means that when you adjust a note, it will automatically snap to what you're specifying is the correct note. So if we go to options and then pitch grid, over here I've got it set to key snap. So that means if I do make changes, it's going to automatically snap to the notes that are within that key that I've specified. If you have it on chromatic snap, then it will automatically snap to the closest note to it chromatically. So either a semitone above or below, whatever is closest, that's what it's going to snap to. Of course, you can also have it on no snap, so it won't snap at all. But again, if you know what key it's in, then it can be quite useful to just have it on key snap, because you can still override things manually afterwards. So we're going to leave it on key snap for now. Okay, let's start looking at the tools so we can get into actually tuning those vocals. Now, this first part is the basic set, or what I like to consider the main set of tools that you need for general tuning of vocals. All different tools are displayed at the top here. The other way to access them, which I find a little bit more useful, is to right click and then it brings up this little toolkit. So it's really handy when you're flicking between the tools quite quickly. The other thing in terms of key commands, which is very useful as well, if you hold Alt and Command, which on Windows I guess is Alt and the Start key, I think, it automatically changes your tool to the zoom, which is really handy because you can zoom in and out and you can get into notes much quicker than having to change the tool to a zoom tool like so. Right, so quick listen to this vocal just for the start of it.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the seams, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Cool, not too bad anyway. So let's have a look at what we can adjust. So the first tool, and one of the main tools you're going to be using, is this first pitch tool here. This will change the pitch of the notes, like so. Now, what you could do, if you feel like this performance was pretty close to where it should be, highlight everything. You can either do select all or just highlight a selection that you want. And if you double click, that's going to snap the pitch to the key which is in the song. There we go. So that's now snapped everything. Essentially what auto-tune will kind of do.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the sea.
Now, the reason it did that, because although that is the correct note to the scale, in this particular song, I'm actually singing something which is slightly bluesy, so therefore it's not specifically in that minor scale, so it thinks it's wrong. So this is a point where I'd need to adjust this note so it goes to where I need it to be. Because I've got snap on, it's not going to snap to this note here, the A. So in order to do that, you can override it. So if you hold Option, you can now go to the note in between the designated scale.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the sea.
Now, there's a bunch of things in here which aren't perfect anyway, because it's adjusted things a little bit, not to my liking, but this is what can happen if you just let things happen automatically. If I want to get rid of all those changes that I've made, you can highlight what you want to change and then go to Edit, Restore Original, Pitch, and undo all pitch changes. That's gone back to where it was. Lovely. Now, the next tool, which is one of your main tools you're going to use, is Pitch Modulation tool. Now, if we look at this longer note here, you can see all these wiggly lines at the end. That is a vibrato on the end of the note. If I don't want all of that to be there, I can just give it a bit of a tweak and I can essentially get rid of it, or at least just kind of tame it somewhat. So currently it sounds like this.
Falling apart at the seams.
Let's just adjust it a little bit.
Falling apart at the seams.
Now it sounded a little bit funny on the end there because I was just going a little bit too heavy with it. So that might work in the mix and it might work with the genre you're doing, but for me, I'd go a little bit more subtle. On the other side of things, if you double click that, it's going to give you a straight line, which is going to be aggressively tuned.
Falling apart at the seams.
Which also isn't ideal. So if I, for example, select everything and then double click like we did with the pitch tool, it's going to aggressively fix the modulation on every single note.
Falling apart at the seams.
Maybe with the pitch tool as well.
Falling apart at the seams.
That might well be the effect that you're going for, in which case, there you go. But in this case, it's certainly not. Let's get rid of all those changes. Now, the other tool, which is super useful, is pitch drift. And that's this one here. Now, when you have a note like this, for example, as you can see, what's happening, you've got a fair amount of vibrato on there, which we can adjust with the modulation tool. But also, as you can see, it kind of slopes upwards a little bit. It goes a little bit sharp at the end. If you ever listen to it, you'll hear that vocal actually drift up somewhat. This will adjust the drift, so almost like a seesaw like that, so we can kind of level it out to encourage the notes to not go sharp or flat at the beginnings or the ends of the notes. Right, so that's a little bit more stable. Couple that with a pitch modulation, and we can just pull down that vibrato a little bit more. Again, a little bit too much for me. That sounds a little bit more natural. So with those 3 tools alone, and with everything being set up correctly at the start, that should be your main toolkit for tuning vocals. Majority of the job can be done with that. But let's look at the other tools, which will allow for some more advanced editing. If you're finding this video useful, please help me out and hit the old like and subscribe and a notification bell. It really helps the channel and helps the old algorithm and all that fancy stuff. Also, if you sign up to the main list below, I'll send you some free stuff, which will be an EQ cheat sheet and some one-shots that you can use in your mixes, all for free. Let's get back to the video. Right, so firstly, we have the time tool. If you need to adjust or correct the timing of some of the notes, this is where you do it. First time tool is this one here. If you grab the beginning or the ends of the notes, it's going to adjust them accordingly. Now, if you're using Logic, since I've got a snap on the timing here, you need to press Alt at the same time when you're clicking it in order to make an adjustment. So it currently goes like this.
Falling apart at the seams.
But we can adjust that, so if it went on too long or not quite long enough, that small adjustment with the time tool on will allow that to happen.
Falling apart at the seams.
Obviously, that's not really what I'm looking for in this, but you get the idea of how you can use that to really fix the timing. Specifically, if something comes in a little bit late or a little bit early, you can just adjust that accordingly. The other thing you can do is if we go to this one here, the time handle tool, you can adjust the timing within a word, so within a selection like this. So if we double click here, we're going to create a little handle like so, and we're going to make a move which will make that word sound a little bit different. Let's have a listen.
Falling apart at the...
So we're kind of giving it a little bit of a swing. All right, let's reset that for now. Okay, let's have a look at note separation. This is really useful. So for example, over here, this actually sounds fine, but these are actually 2 notes here. It's not quite seeing it as 2 notes. So what I can do is with that note separation tool selected, if I just double click at the point where the 2 separate notes are visually meant to be, it will break up these blobs, as you can see. And it just means that you can now adjust these notes independently. So whether you want to just put a little bit of pitch modulation on this note instead of the other note, that's how you do it. Again, as you can see, it's slightly missed that here. So we can double click with that tool on and it will separate those notes out for us.
Falling apart at the seams.
Now, the second part of this note separation tool is if we go to separation type, so this one just beneath it, it's going to allow you to separate these notes from each other. So because of the way Melodyne works, it's essentially recording audio in one piece. Although it's seeing different notes, it's still seeing the audio as one thing. So when we did that time adjustment, for example, it might have been lengthening the preceding note, but the following note was then getting shortened. It was getting adjusted along. So if we highlight these 2 that we want to separate and double click, now you see that that has now been broken. So now these are 2 completely independent notes and they won't affect each other. Go back to the time tool. And now when I adjust these notes, it's not going to touch the note that's following it. It's completely separate now, though this isn't going to sound very good.
Falling apart at the seams.
Now that's all over the place now. The fact it gives you ability to do that is really, really cool. Let's reset these changes. Some other useful tools are as follows. We've got the Sibilance balance tool. So if we go down to this, now remember all the sibilants are going to be in the consonants. They're not going to be in these main blobs because they're where the vowel sounds are. It's going to be in these stripy parts. So have a listen. That first part is going to be an S sound.
I see you, bro.
So for example, if we take this, we take the sibilance control to this little section here, pull it down.
I see you, brother.
That sounds like I've got a lisp.
I see you, brother.
That's made it a little bit more subtle. Now, personally, I don't use this too often. I find an automatic de-esser does a slightly better job, but this can come in handy when you have just the odd troublesome note or troublesome consonant which is just sticking out and you just need to adjust that ever so slightly. So that's the main thing. Just make sure you use this in small amounts. Another tool is the fade tool. So if you're coming in a little bit too loud at the start of a word, you can adjust that. So let's say on this note here, for example, we can put a massive fade on that. I'm doing it in extreme at the moment so you can hear what it does.
I see you, brother.
You know, but if you pull that back a little bit, it might just take the edge off a little bit and that could work.
I see you, brother.
In this particular case, it doesn't really need it, but it's really handy when you have things that just attack a little bit too hard, or maybe it's a backing vocal which is just sticking out a little bit too much and you want that to fit in a little bit nicer with the lead vocal. That can be really handy for the fronts of the notes there. The other thing in this same section is the Amplitude tool. This basically just adjusts the amplitude or the gain or the volume. So it's almost like a clip gain. So you can adjust the level of individual notes. So let's have a look at this note again. I'm going to bring it down in volume. Let's make it really soft so you can hear the difference.
I see you, brother.
Of course, we don't need it like that.
I see you, brother.
Now it's sticking out even more aggressively. Now this can be really handy when you just have those few words here and there which do pop out or don't pop out enough, and you just need to make a minor adjustment. Like I said, it's essentially like using clip gain within your DAW, but it's all done within this. So you can do so much of the editing just within this Melodyne window. Now, lastly, the other tool we have here is a Formant tool. This essentially adjusts the timbre of the note. More often than not, it's used as an effect. So for example, let's select all of these and we're going to bring the Formant right down. And you're going to get loads more low end to the voice. Also, it kind of pulls down the pitch somewhat too. Lots of pop and R&B like to use this.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the...
Okay, and of course you can go the other way. Get ready for the chipmunks.
I see you, brother, falling apart.
Again, not something I use often, but it can be a fantastic effect in the right context, of course. There are also some macros up here which can be quite handy for some general editing. So if we have everything selected or a portion of what you want to edit selected and go up the top here, you can easily adjust the pitch center. So then that's going to be finding the pitch in the note and then just bring it into the closest note that it can see. And you can also adjust the pitch drift, which again just starts to bring everything into the closest note also. So let's have a look at the changes there. You can see the move.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the sea.
I've done it fairly aggressively there, as you can hear. But what that can be really handy doing is if you have a performance which is already a great performance, it just needs a little bit of tidying, you can just very quickly kind of grab that whole thing, give it a little bit of a tweak, even if you're just adjusting it by 20% or something, and it just nudges all those notes in just a little bit for you and isn't too destructive. You've also got a timing macro, which will snap everything to a grid in terms of the timing. I'd say this is more relevant for percussive sounds, so you wouldn't use this quite as much on vocals, but if you do have something that's very choppy, then it can be very useful there. One thing which can be quite handy as macros go is this one here, which is the note leveling macro. So you have two sliders here, which is make the quiet notes louder. So anything that's a little bit too soft, it's going to start to bring them up. You can just see some of the softer notes there increasing, and also make the loud notes quieter, which is pretty self-explanatory there. It's just going to bring down anything which is just jumping out that little bit too much.
I see you, brother, falling apart at the sea.
So what that's helped to do is to just level out the performance a little bit and try to make things that little bit more consistent, that little bit more even. It's quite a handy tool to use, especially before you do compression, because it means that the levels are adjusted a little bit beforehand, so your compressor is doing slightly less work. And that's a lot. Hopefully that should be enough to allow you to tune your vocal within Melodyne. One thing I do say when using Melodyne is to try not to overdo it, unless that's an effect you're going for, of course. But if you're trying to keep it natural, if you're trying to make it so you're not hearing the Melodyne working on the track, then making small adjustments here and there tends to work much better and it sounds way more natural. Melodyne is easily one of the most comprehensive, if not most comprehensive, vocal tuning tool out there, and it's so deep, it's got so much in there, so it's really easy to tweak a performance and get it just right. Of course, if you have a singer which cannot sing at all, it can do a great job there too. It can only go so far, of course, but it really can work some absolute magic. So if you've got any questions, hit me up in the comments below. Otherwise, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Goodbye.